Greetings, everyone. This is Denise Scotto, the chair of the International Day of Yoga Committee at the United Nations. And joining me today is Karuna, Light on Light, Kundalini Yoga, one of our very core members of our committee. It's my pleasure to be here today with you, Karuna. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so ready to be with you. And it's been a long time since we've sat together and been able to really open up this volume of energy. So I feel so blessed. Thank you.
I do think that the last time was when we had one of our International Day of Yoga events. So that was definitely a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's about time for us to be together. And rather than speak about the underlying principles of yoga directly, today I think that we have a different topic that we've been talking about on and off for these past few years, that deal with the situation and circumstances of women and girls around the world, and how in different societies, women and girls are treated in very, very different ways. And maybe part of that is due to religion, part of that is due to culture. There are many reasons for this, and it's something that you and I have talked about with specific countries and specific situations. And today, I think we're going to try to shine more of an understanding on it from the underlying values of yoga. At least that's my hope.
Yes, me too. So, as I sensitively dived into some footage today, very recent footage of some survivors and not so survivors, female, who were interrogated and kept from getting into their places of solitude and safety while they escaped their various places of Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia. The strength in these women to come forth and say their story, tell their story, Denise, in the way of all of us viewers, of how we have to escape even our own fathers and brothers, to realize our families are not safe, and then to see how we can go about doing this in a way for our own personal safety. And it's almost impossible. I've recently educated myself through the various footage that's out there to realize, and I suggest all our viewers do the same, to just see what you and I were speaking about years ago around Afghanistan and around the difficult times for these young women and the crones, the grandmothers that are, because when we're stuck like that, and we go back to saying how privileged we are to even be able to sit and meditate in a yogic practice, in that situation of direness, of not being able to get somewhere safely, are you really going to take the experience of yoga and choose it over your survival?
Well, let me say a few things in response to this. I think you bring up an excellent point, Karuna, about human security and security for women and girls, because it's what you talked about. It's females throughout their lifespan, from when they're very, very young infants until they're much older, to when they're wise women, however age that is in different societies, if it's in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, from that spectrum. So human security is one of the fundamental human rights, to be safe in one's body, to be safe and feel that safety, and to have no threats of fear, no threats of violence. So this is a huge thing for everyone around the world. And we do see it particularly with regard to many women and girls in different societies where there is such discrimination and gender-based violence. So this is a huge issue that we are talking about, especially in UN circles when we talk about how women are and girls are not enjoying their fundamental rights and their fundamental civil rights, their freedoms. And the example that you cited to in Afghanistan is one that's close to my heart because years ago, when I was working in the UN as a staff member, I happened to be working at a particular time in the Division for the Advancement of Women. And this was before UN Women, the specialized agency dealing with women's issues, was formulated. And at that time, I was helping the Undersecretary General and Special Assistant to the ESG, who was dealing with women around the world, to get more women to participate in the Loya Jirga, which was the constitutional arrangement to deal with the drafting of the new constitution in Afghanistan after the Taliban regime had fallen. So I'm very familiar with women who have been under the Taliban regime and who have not been able to, one, leave their home for medical treatment only if their father, their brother, their uncle would say that it was necessary and then would accompany them, would not be able to have studies even at primary school unless their, again, father or older brother approved of that and allowed them to do that, or they had a special teacher or private tutor coming into the home. We're talking about something that's so fundamental when we talk about medical treatment and medical care, and how so many young girls were forcefully married at a very young age. So we're talking about forced and early marriages and what that does when someone is 8 years old, 10 years old. And that's devastating not only to one's physical self, but to one's emotional, mental, and spiritual self. So, my heart really had a lot of suffering in seeing how women were treated as property, were treated as second-class citizens, and were really not respected as a human being. And this goes back to what you and I speak about when we talk about the underlying principles and the values of yoga, how human dignity is so important, how mutual respect is so important, how equality, because we know yoga is about inclusivity and unity. And that is premised on equality as well, and acceptance and tolerance of what is different from the other. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. And yet we find we are so depleted in the sensitivity of the situation that where do we get the practice to stimulate our inner awareness to say, go to sit and have this experience, to meditate and have an experience to somehow filter through the trust and truth aspect that this too can turn out to be the miracle unfolding in the terror and the trauma of what's happening at that very moment. And that's where the knowledge, wisdom, and grace of patience and tolerance and yogic practice comes into not only sudden, there's a sudden solution, but because we've been raised in this consciousness, or not, but we've studied it, and so we've raised ourselves in this consciousness, which is so self-acknowledging. It's rebuilding what doesn't work and taking that step towards a successful way of showing and documenting to other women, young women, and the crones and the grandmothers, and everybody watching this, in their 30s who want to have children but are afraid to have children. And we're talking about the United States of America, of women in the USA who are stopping the privilege of becoming a mother in themselves, a goddess, in any which way you want to take that, whether giving birth or birthing, new ideas, or being foster parents, whatever it is, adopting, whatever it is, still the courage inside to find that will work too, that will serve the bigger picture. And yet what we see in Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia and these places, we ask the UN, we ask the yoga teachers, we ask the science, please, let's find a way to stop the Taliban, find a way to stop masking women and cloaking them where you can't see them anymore. The whole idea about false promise, giving them a driver's license and then taking away that whole idea is such a abandonment of promise. And that stems, as we were speaking about earlier, how men rule women in this way. And we're speaking also, on a subject called the divine feminine. And we're talking about, how it happened so long ago. This happened so long ago when women, lost our roles and abilities to speak, and we lost our voice. And, so we chant and we meditate and we speak together on these issues. And yet still the battle is going deeper and deeper into the grave of, humanities. And it's so old. It should not be existing in our time, but yet it's so prevalent to the Aquarian age and the Aquarian way. And we're seeing that the Piscean age of greed and the old ways of politics and, the history of what's going has not worked. We all see that. We see it's not working. And yet we're so feared with our religious upbringing that we still will go back to what's already been translated differently and proven from the different Bibles and, and the Hebrew and the Catholicism, and how it's all translated to fit into the fear instead of the love of what the scriptures are really writing about. And that's why I think with yogic practice and experience, when we can chant those beautiful names of God and Goddess, that there's something in that will give somebody like these women who want to get out of this situation, and they are, the courage to break through and say, oh, I'm going. I'm doing this.
I have seen so many inspiring women.
Yeah.
These women are just women who I must bow down at their feet. I can't begin to tell you the women that I have met, not only from Afghanistan, but different countries in the Mideast and North Africa region and in Africa, because the situations that they've endured and they've been able to overcome are situations that are so dramatic and so isolating that I don't even know how they've been able to do it, except for the spirit that has been able to accompany them and move them, and how they've listened to that and has such faith in that in order to take action and become survivors and agents of change. I want to get back to what you talked about, how sitting in meditation is so significant for all of us. For all of us, because it helps us to see what is. It helps us to really look at that in the face and to say, what is my part in this? To say, how can I help? Even if it is to continue to sit and meditate and to visualize women and girls around the world being
Yes.
treated with dignity, respect, and equality. So I'd like to, just before we go, have one other talking point, if I may. And as we sit, it's also about holding the men and boys in our heart, too. It's
100%.
about seeing men in their fullness and richness and them thriving at the same time and walking in partnership with women. I truly believe this. And I've seen some wonderful champions of women in many regions around the world. I'm sure that you also agree that there are so many men with goodness in their heart at the same time.
Oh, beyond. It's such a balance. We're balanced. We're fine. We're good. We need to just invite them in more and give them so much, and not challenge each other. We're in such a challenging environment with identity and gender. And, we're women, we're men, we're all of it. We're the divine feminine, we're the divine masculine. And if, whatever people want to do to their physique and their bodies and whatever is all up to them. But the truth is the word you chose the minute ago, which was spirit. Because when you said spirit, the whole energy of this conversation went to that heightened place of acknowledging there's a chance for us to find that spiritual side. Doesn't have to have a name or religion or a dress code. It's the interior of our being. It's to choose to rebirth every day. I say to women, and I'm a woman, so I'm 100% woman in that sense of we change every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, you try, I say to gents living with that. You try to do what we're trying to do in that sense of we change, women change, their hormones change every 2 hours, and we have 11 moon centers. So can you imagine the folly that's going on and you're trying to explain yourself and you wonder why you're not understood? Just forget it. It's the mistakes that make us stronger because they're mistakes. And so there's no judgment. There's no, and I was reading something today and I just wanted to share the true context of meditation is spiritual life. At their height, the states of consciousness described in the classic forces and resources can lift one out of the small-mindedness bred by daily pursuits, as well as transform ordinary awarenesses. And you're talking about sitting. And so if you sit and you close your eyes, and you breathe, inhaling and exhaling consciously as long as you can, you're going to get something like that. It's just going to give you what you're ready for, what you're ready for. So there's so much dialogue about our destiny and how we're going to meet that goal. And yet if we just cycle into where we're at this very moment, and go into the forgiveness and forget the past of fear and add again the love, that we will always dialogue in this way. And yet circle of communication is so relevant at these times. We need to journal. We need to move our bodies. We cannot be sedentary anymore. Sedentary. What's the word? I don't even know how to do that. I get so nature. And yet people are in cities and go, come on, where's nature then? Tell me where a park, under a tree, any old tree will do. Just hug it. Something like that.
I want to get back to what you spoke about when you quoted the statement that you made about how sitting in meditation really can elevate one's understanding and awareness. And many of our listeners and our viewers are so aware of that and have had mystical experiences themselves because they're long-term, long-standing practitioners. And they've been doing this regularly, day in, day out, evening in, evening out. And people who have been regular, long-standing practitioners keep sitting because they feel the value. They feel it in their body, they feel it in their emotions, and they feel the mind changing as well. They feel the heart opening. And they feel that in spite of the tremendous suffering in the world, because these women and girls are suffering, and one can even say, how are they living, right?
Right.
They're barely even surviving. That's not living, right? It's not thriving, but it's not living. And then at the same time, what about these men? How wounded are they to be acting in the way that they are, that they feel that they have to treat a woman or a girl worse than anything else that is alive, not like something that is living, not like a human being. It's a dehumanization, that's for sure. We can say chattel, property, whatever it is. But it's about really taking in the tremendous suffering that there is in this world, in our hearts, and really just taking it in, looking at it, and saying it's all about love. And this is what it's about, right? It's about that karuna, that compassion, that really huge heart, kindness, and the care that we feel. And as I said, it's about love. So as we wind down this conversation, I'm just going to ask if you have a 1 minute that you'd like to contribute about love, about Karuna.
Well, Karuna means compassion. And when I received her name in Varanasi on the banks of the Ganga in a Mahashivaratri ceremony, I say that to you all because, hey, I was there. I didn't ask for the name. And I crossed that Ganga by myself. And I got myself to India. And I didn't know what the drive was. But I have to say, as I've experienced the tragic trauma of loss, the early traumas that stick to us, the ones that start when you're 7 years old, the ones that, with divorced parents, with abandonments of a father, that just starts off everybody's way. As we were speaking about the men who treat the women like that from the Taliban, the women who are raised like that, who are having to go through that regime, all, and it's not that long ago. It's like in the 90s, right? Which is 80s and 90s, which is like ridiculous. It should never exist, but it should have only, come and gone. But even if you talk about, if you look at Obama's special that he has called Work, you see this in Philly. You see this in Pennsylvania. You see women getting $7 an hour and, changing the diapers of elders and having 5 kids at home. And it's all being exposed. You hear Michelle Obama speaking about when they go low, we go high. She talks about light. We are making the change, but we have to start by saying yes to crossing the Ganga metaphor, to getting to these places that awaken inside of us, our soul, and then to go out and teach it and to lend a hand and to always be there for everyone, to drop everything so that so we have self-care and self-love. That's in our own inner Bible. Our own inner wisdom is to take care of ourselves. The word tired, the word, beyond the overwhelm, we have to, and this word worry is not working with what is going to make change in the Aquarian way. So Karuna means compassion, but did I have to learn that when I got that name in 2004? Oh my goodness. I recognize that I am a child of love. I have been raised by myself with love because it came innately, whatever it is, however nature gave it to me, to walk barefoot early on, to let go of my pain and trauma. But that was not easy, and it never will be, and it will always remain that it needs attention to detail around it. And if that means going upside down with my legs up because I know that my psoas will release my trauma, that's what I'll teach. So every student out there and will always be a student because I want to learn. I know there is so much more for us to share and to learn and to lean into without fear. So to answer your question, let's replace fear with love only. And when we're not there, let's only go there and just chant the mantra, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo, Sarva Shakti, Sarva Shakti, Sarva Shakti, Namo Namo, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo, Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata, Mother, Shakti, energy, power, transformation, Namo Namo, I bow, I bow, I bow, I bow. And something's got to happen. With all those meditators out there watching this, something's got to happen, right? Everyone?
Well, everyone has had traumas. There's not one person on this planet who hasn't suffered and had trauma.
100%.
And in terms of how to move through that, I think people have found different ways. Many people who are with us today have found a way through a spiritual practice, be it through a yogic practice or another practice.
Yes.
We know that it can be so transformative, to use your word. So absolutely.
Yes.
And I've done a lot of work on human rights for almost 30 years now. It's hard to
Thank
believe.
you.
I came to human rights through the
Thank you.
genocide that was going on in Rwanda
Oh,
back in the 1990s, and how the women and girls were being affected, rape as a war crime, and mutilations of just cutting off breasts, and on and on and on. So I have to say that these are examples of the very worst of humanity. But
Yes.
as you alluded to, Karuna, there's no country that's immune from really having any kind of gender-based violence, discrimination, and a lot of biases against women. You know, you talked about the gender pay gap that we here in the United States and many countries in the developed world are facing. That's just one of them. And childcare is another huge issue, you
Mm.
know. So every country, it's not about singling out Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia. There's every single country can do better with regard to treating its women and girls around the world. I just want to make that very, very clear
Thank
because
you.
it's not Karuna's intention or my intention, you know, to say, hey, look, this is the list of the bad countries, this is the bad report card.
No.
It's not about that at all. You know, we're just here to hold all of the women and girls in our heart and to also hold the men and the boys in our heart at the same time and to provide them with a sense of compassion. And having been to Varanasi and up at Rishikesh and been to Mama Ganga herself, I absolutely know how powerful she is and how there's such an energy, such a real energy that is beyond words that can really be transformative for
Yes.
us as individuals and then for us as a collective. And it's no surprise that there's so much arti at the Ganga, be it Parmat Nikatan or be it small little tiny places and people who, you know, happen to be there at Rishikesh and the river, the Mama Ganga, at any point in time. People just, they get their lamp out, they get a little tiny coconut, they may get a little flower or even a shell with water in it, and
Mm.
that's it. And we hail to Mother Ganga. So, on that note, I want to thank you, Karuna, for joining me today.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
want to thank each and every one of you for joining us, if you're listening to us or if you're viewing this. And definitely be in touch with Karuna and myself because we do appreciate hearing from you and to dialogue with you and to work together. Namaste, everyone. Greetings of peace.